It's the deepest place on Earth, 7 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean.
That's real footage, filmed from the surface of the one place on this planet almost no one has ever actually seen. What lies beneath is so violent it can crack a submarine's window like glass, so lightless that sunlight has never once reached it. This is what they found in the deepest place on Earth, an animal that reinforces its own body with metal, a strange sound that took 10 years, and an AI to finally explain, a geological mystery scientists still can't solve. What they found, in other words, is proof that even the most extreme place on the planet was never actually empty. To understand how anyone found any of it, it helps to start with the place itself, because from the surface, it gives away nothing at all. The trench itself. We begin far from land, somewhere in the western Pacific, roughly 200 miles southeast of Guam. Above the surface, there is nothing to see, just open water stretching out in every direction, calm and endless, giving no hint at all of what sits beneath it. Somewhere down there, the ocean floor bends downward into a wound in the Earth's crust, nearly 1,500 miles long, curved in a slow crescent, roughly 43 miles wide at its broadest point. This is the Mariana Trench, and it did not appear gently. Two great slabs of the Earth's crust meet here, and one is losing the fight. The Pacific Plate is sliding underneath the smaller Philippine Sea Plate, forced downward in a process that has been grinding on for millions of years and is still happening today, somewhere beneath us, right now. Follow that trench along its length, and you eventually reach its lowest point, a place called Challenger Deep. Depending on which survey you trust, it sits somewhere between 10,920 and 10,984 meters below the surface. A number that large stops meaning anything on its own, so picture it a different way instead. Take Mount Everest, the tallest point on land, and set it down inside this same trench. The summit would still sit more than 2 kilometers underwater, gone completely before it ever broke the surface. We are heading toward that exact point now. But before we go down, it's worth knowing this. Nobody set out looking for this place at all. It found them entirely by accident, a century and a half ago. The accidental discovery. In March of 1875, a British research vessel called the HMS Challenger sat in open water, doing something its crew had done nearly 500 times already on that same voyage across the world's oceans. Taking a routine sounding, lowering a weighted rope over the side to measure how far down the ocean floor actually sat. Every previous measurement had followed a familiar pattern. The rope would fall a certain distance, tighten, and stop. This time, it kept going. The crew fed out more rope, waiting for the tension that would tell them they'd finally hit bottom, and it simply never came. Nearly 27,000 feet of rope went into the water before the weight finally touched down, by far the deepest of anything they'd measured on the entire expedition. They had no way of knowing what they'd actually found. There was no name for it yet, no understanding of trenches or subducting plates, none of the science that explains it today. All they had was a number nobody expected, and a spot they marked on their charts as Swire Deep, named after Herbert Swire, the ship's own navigating officer. Even that number turned out to be too low. Decades later, in 1899, an American expedition returned to roughly the same waters and measured over 31,000 feet, already 6,000 feet deeper than the Challenger's original sounding had suggested. By the 1950s, a British ship, fittingly named HMS Challenger 2, swapped rope for sonar, a technique that measures depth by timing how long a sound wave takes to bounce off the ocean floor and return, and found 35,640 feet. Modern instruments have since settled on a figure close to 36,000 feet, nearly 7 miles down, a number that took 3 separate generations of explorers, working a full century apart, just to properly measure. That's how this place was found. What it actually feels like to be inside it is a different question entirely, and one that took considerably longer to answer. The environment. Descending toward that number, scientists finally measured. The first thing that changes isn't the darkness. It's the weight of the water itself, pressing down harder with every meter, until it becomes something almost impossible to picture accurately. At the bottom, the pressure reaches roughly 1,100 times what we feel standing on the surface. One physicist, trying to put that into ordinary terms, compared it to balancing a full-grown elephant on a single human thumbnail. That's the force bearing down on every square inch of anything resting on that seafloor, every second, without pause. But pressure isn't the only thing waiting down there. Light disappears long before the pressure becomes extreme. Past roughly 1,000 meters down, sunlight simply stops reaching any further, and for the remaining 6 miles or so to the bottom, there is nothing but total darkness, uninterrupted by anything except whatever light a visiting submersible happens to carry with it. Cold arrives early too, hovering just above freezing for most of the descent. But here's a detail that runs against what you'd expect. At the very bottom, the water is actually very slightly warmer than it is a bit further up. The pressure itself is responsible, generating a tiny amount of energy simply from being compressed that hard. The same way rapidly squeezing anything tends to produce a bit of heat, warming the water there by fractions of a degree. Given all of that, it would be easy to imagine this place as something closer to a horror film than a real location on Earth. But Mackenzie Geringer, a scientist at SUNY Geneseo who has personally made the descent herself, pushes back directly against that image. She describes the trench not as threatening, but as beautiful and peaceful, a genuinely different read from someone who's actually been there rather than imagined it from the surface. Pressure and darkness that would seem to rule out life entirely. And yet, a small handful of people have gone down anyway to see for themselves. The few who've been there. In 1960, 2 men climbed inside a small steel sphere and did something no one had ever done before. Jacques Picard and Don Walsh descended aboard a vessel called the Trieste, a submersible built specifically to survive crushing ocean pressure, aiming for the very bottom of the same trench the Challenger's crew had discovered by accident 85 years earlier. Partway down, something cracked. One of the plastic viewing windows had fractured under the sheer weight of the water pressing against it. They kept going anyway, and eventually reached the bottom, becoming the first human beings to ever see the deepest point on the planet with their own eyes. They stayed for just 20 minutes before beginning the long ascent back to the surface. In that brief window at the bottom, they reported seeing something moving across the silt. A flatfish resting on the seafloor. It's a claim that's followed this expedition ever since, and it's worth being honest about it. Scientists today believe this was almost certainly a misidentification, not a confirmed sighting of an actual fish species living at that depth. What's just as remarkable as that dive is what happened after it. Nobody went back down to that exact spot for 52 years. Not until 2012, when filmmaker James Cameron completed a solo descent in a purpose-built submersible called Deep Sea Challenger, becoming only the 3rd human being ever to reach the bottom, spending hours documenting the trench alone before making his own long ascent back up. Cameron's dive turned out to be the moment that finally broke the drought. Since 2019, several more people have followed him down. Victor Vescovo, an explorer and financier who has since made a project of diving to the deepest point in every ocean on Earth, made the descent himself. So did Kelly Walsh, Don Walsh's own son, following the same path his father carved out decades earlier. And astronaut Kathy Sullivan, who had already walked in space, became the first woman to ever reach Challenger Deep, adding the deepest point on Earth to a resume that already included one of its highest frontiers. That's the story of the humans who've made it down there. What they and their machines actually found waiting for them is where this gets stranger. Creatures of the deep. Despite everything working against life down there, the trench isn't empty. What actually lives at these depths looks less like survival and more like nature, quietly rewriting its own rulebook. Start with the Mariana Snailfish, discovered in 2014 at roughly 8,000 meters down. At the time, it was confirmed as the deepest living fish ever recorded, translucent enough to see straight through its skin, and built entirely without the rigid bone structure that would simply be crushed at that depth. A different snailfish species has since been filmed even deeper, at 8,336 meters, so the record didn't last forever. But for years, this was the fish that redefined how deep a vertebrate could actually survive. Then there's the Dumbo octopus, the deepest living octopus known to science, named for the two ear-like fins that give it its unmistakable shape. It doesn't carry an ink sac at all, the defense mechanism most octopuses use to escape predators. Down here, though, there are barely any predators left to escape from, so that defense simply stopped being worth the extra weight. Even the trench's amphipods, small shrimp-like scavengers, split into two very different stories worth keeping separate. Hirundellea gigas, only a few centimeters long, made headlines for something no other known animal had ever done before: reinforcing its own exoskeleton with aluminum, absorbed directly from sediment on the seafloor. Alicella gigantea, known as the supergiant amphipod, is a completely different species, notable simply for growing to a size that dwarfs its relatives elsewhere in the ocean. But the list doesn't end there either. Xenophyophores are single-celled organisms that grow as large as a human fist, among the biggest individual cells known to exist anywhere on Earth, a single unit of life large enough to see without a microscope at all. And in 2016, a research team from NOAA, the U.S. government agency responsible for ocean and atmospheric science, filmed something near the Enigma seamount that nobody had ever recorded before: a translucent, glowing jellyfish, still unnamed today, that hunts by staying almost completely still instead of chasing anything down. None of this looks like life clinging to survival. It looks like life that's found an entirely different set of rules to live by. And as strange as the animals down there are, one sound recorded rising from the trench turned out to be even harder to explain. The sound science couldn't explain. In 2014, researchers picked up something strange rising through the water near the trench, a sound that didn't match anything in their existing records. It opened with a low, groaning note, then snapped into a sharp, high-pitched pulse. They gave it a name and nothing else, calling it simply the Biotwang, because nobody could say yet what was actually making it. For a full decade, it stayed that way. Researchers suspected the sound was biological, coming from something alive rather than some quirk of geology or machinery. But suspicion wasn't proof, and the source stayed a mystery year after year. The answer finally came in 2024, and it took more than a hydrophone, an underwater microphone built specifically to pick up sound beneath the surface, to get there. NOAA researchers trained an AI system on more than 200,000 hours of ocean audio recordings, searching for any pattern that might match. It worked, and the sound traced back conclusively to Bryde's whales, a species that spends much of its life alone, moving across huge stretches of open ocean. Scientists now believe the whales use this exact call to find each other across that distance, a long-range signal sent out into open water in the hope that another whale, somewhere out there, hears it and answers back. Worth being precise about where these whales actually fit into this story, though. They're passing through the waters above the trench, not living down in the hadal depths themselves. The sound came from the surface world drifting down, not from anything native to the trench floor. One mystery, solved after 10 years with the right combination of patience and technology. But solving one doesn't mean this trench has given up everything it's still holding on to. Mysteries still unsolved. Solving the Biotwang might make it feel like this trench is finally giving up its secrets one by one. It isn't. Some of the biggest questions here haven't moved at all. Take the missing water problem, one geologists still can't fully explain. As the Pacific Plate slides beneath the Philippine Sea Plate, it doesn't go down empty-handed. Enormous quantities of water get dragged along with it, trapped inside the minerals of the oceanic crust itself, pulled deep into the Earth's mantle along with the rock carrying it. That water is supposed to come back eventually. Volcanoes along the Mariana Arc, the chain of volcanic islands sitting behind the trench, are the mechanism meant to release it, sending it back up through eruptions over time. But when scientists actually measure how much water those volcanoes release, the numbers don't add up. Far more water goes down into the mantle than ever seems to come back out through volcanic activity, and nobody has a confirmed answer for where the rest of it actually ends up. Maybe it's being stored somewhere deep inside the mantle that hasn't been detected yet. Maybe it's moving through some pathway back to the surface scientists haven't identified. This isn't an unexplained mystery dressed up for effect. It's a real, unresolved question sitting at the center of active geological research. A genuine reminder that a place this thoroughly measured can still hide something this basic. The hadal zone. All of this, the pressure, the darkness, the creatures, the missing water, actually sits inside a much larger named region that stretches far beyond just this one trench. Scientists call it the hadal zone, generally defined as the ocean between roughly 6,000 and 11,000 meters deep, the deepest layer that exists anywhere on Earth. And the Mariana Trench is only one part of it. For years, researchers assumed this zone was smaller and simpler than it actually is. A 2021 study led by Newcastle University and the British Geological Survey changed that picture considerably. Once researchers properly accounted for smaller, easily overlooked features like fracture zones and broad ocean basins, features that don't get the same attention as a dramatic trench, the total hadal zone turned out to be roughly 4 times larger than anyone had previously assumed, a total area comparable in size to Alaska, Texas, and Montana combined. But that wasn't the only surprising thing the same research revealed. The Mariana Trench itself isn't one single continuous habitat the way most people assume. It's actually 5 physically separate zones, divided by underwater ridges that scientists hadn't properly mapped or accounted for before. That separation matters far beyond geology. Species living in these isolated pockets may be evolving on entirely independent paths from one another, cut off by these ridges the same way island species evolve differently once separated by open ocean. An area this vast and this poorly mapped should be one of the hardest places on Earth for anything human-made to reach. And yet, something did. The pollution that got there first. For all the effort it's taken humans to reach this trench themselves, something else managed to get there well ahead of them, and it didn't need a submersible to do it. In 2019, Victor Vescovo's record-setting dive to Challenger Deep turned up what appeared to be a plastic bag resting on the seafloor at the deepest point on Earth. Worth being precise, Vescovo never retrieved or formally confirmed the object. His own description was careful, noting only that he believed it was probably plastic, not a verified sample. That plastic bag framing comes from early headlines reacting to the sighting, not confirmed identification. The broader pollution picture holds up without needing that single object, though. Research published in the journal Nature, Ecology and Evolution found pollution levels in organisms living in the Mariana Trench, exceeding levels found in some of the most heavily industrialized coastal regions on the planet. A University of Michigan study traced part of the mechanism. Mercury released by sources like coal-fired power plants settles into the ocean, gets absorbed by fish near the surface, and rides down into the trench inside those same fish once they die and sink. Separate research in a Royal Society journal confirmed microplastics inside the actual tissue of amphipods living at hadal depths, not nearby, but inside the animals themselves. Pollution didn't just eventually reach the most remote point on the planet. In real, measurable ways, it got there first. The deepest place on Earth was never empty. It held an animal armored in aluminum, a 10-year mystery that took AI to finally solve, and a question about the planet's own missing water that still doesn't have an answer. And at the very bottom of all of it, human trash got there first. It just took us this long to find any of it.